Hello, my name is Christina Erickson. I'm the Sustainability Director here at Champlain. Happy to have you all here. I have some notes because I can't remember anything. So this is exciting because this event falls really nicely along with our Sustainability Month and Kilowatt Challenge here at Champlain. And here we are at week 2 of both. I wanted to let you know about a couple of events happening. One today at 3:30 is an energy tour of our campus around to find out what's going on with energy conservation and efficiency projects, as well as some of our renewable energy projects. And this is especially special because Bob Bolin, who has worked with us for the past several years, is our energy manager. The guy is a genius, and I don't put that lightly. He's super smart. He's going to the city. He's taking a job with the city. You all get him, which is exciting. But we're sad. So today is a very special thing where you get to come and see Bob for the last time at Champlain College. But fortunately, he'll be doing good stuff in Burlington Electric Department. Also, next Monday at 12:30, we have a very special panel, which is our keynote event of the month, and this is a discussion, a facilitated discussion around how should Vermont put a price on carbon. Some of you have heard about the carbon tax, cap and trade options. We're going to have 3 distinguished panelists come. One is Dr. Mark Perdone of the Quebec Institute of Carbon. Then we also have Vermont State Representative Mary Sullivan and Dr. Joshua Farley from UVM. So that's going to be a really fascinating, very current, very relevant topic. There's current legislation in the Vermont State Legislature discussing this. So if you've heard about it and want to learn a little more, next Monday at 12:30. For any of you who are residential students, you can get Kilowatt Challenge points for any of these events, including today. I'll be sending a clipboard around. So if you live on campus, go ahead and sign up so that your building can get some points for the Kilowatt Challenge. So today, why we are here is that 3 faculty members and I were awarded a grant to help include more environmental service learning projects at Champlain. And so we've got Dr. Robin Collins and her environmental earth science classes, Dr. Cheryl Casey and her Foundations of Human Communication class, and Dr. Valerie Esposito's place-based environmental study class. All 3, and actually 4, since Robin has 2 sections, classes are focusing on water quality as the topic for their service learning projects, and all working with the Blue program, of which we're going to hear more about today. So this is exciting. And but what does that all mean, and what's the big deal, and why is all this work happening anyway? What we're going to have first is Megan Moir, who is our, I love this title, the Stormwater Plangineer, very clever, for the City of Burlington Department of Public Works. She's going to go over what it is about stormwater. Perhaps you've heard about stormwater, perhaps you haven't. Maybe you've heard about other pollutants that are going into the lake, but what is the city's role in that? What's going down our drains, and how is that affecting the lake? And then we're going to turn it over to Chris Rottler, who runs the Blue program, which is a community-based program working with property owners and making their properties more lake-friendly and getting less of that stormwater going directly to the lake. So it's good. And this is, it's one of those things where we hear lots about the problems of what's going on in environmental issues. This is a very solutions-based thing. It's something real, tangible, and, fairly easy, not super easy, but fairly easy, of things that you all, perhaps your rental property owners downtown, or if you live here in the downtown area, things that you all can do starting today or starting tomorrow to help the lake. So without any more from me, I'm going to turn it over to Megan to talk about what is this big deal about stormwater anyway. So welcome, Megan.
Thanks, and thanks everybody. So just to clarify, you guys are not necessarily students from the classes of the professors that were mentioned. You're just awesome students who are interested in this topic, interested in potentially partnering in the service learning. Okay, so you're all of the above. That helps me just provide context. So yes, so I'm going to just talk to you a little bit, orient you to what stormwater is and its role in Burlington and why we have issues. And the one thing that I like to talk about first is that I love working in water resources because it's constant learning. This was something I learned last year that blew my mind. I love candy corn. I was born on Halloween, have always eaten candy corn. Always kind of wondered why I call it candy corn, but in fact, if you arrange it in this way, it looks like corn. Maybe you guys already knew this, maybe all the youth of today are aware of this, but I was fascinated by this, and just it's sort of a metaphor for always looking at things differently. Don't ever assume that you know what know that you know everything about a particular piece of candy or a particular field of your science. You may learn something new even when you least expect it. So, why do we have a stormwater problem? It's been raining for eons, ever since the Earth was created. What's the big deal now? Why do we have pollution in the lake? Why do we have flooding? And I always say it's not really a stormwater problem or a rainfall problem, it's an impervious problem. Impervious surface, basically, the world, if you think about it as a sponge, water falls from the sky and is able to soak in, generally speaking, if we don't alter the environment. However, we as humans, in order to drive around and have our homes and whatnot, have put impervious surface, which keeps the water from soaking into the ground. So we've covered up the sponge. So we end up with, the amount of rainfall, when 2 inches of rainfall happens, instead of only a teeny tiny amount maybe running off, almost all of that 2 inches runs off and hits our storm drains, hits our lake, whereas before that wasn't happening. The other thing with impervious surface is it also provides what I think of, if you're into hydrology, a slick surface. So if you have pollutants, if you, God forbid, accidentally dump some oil on a lawn, the lawn has some ability to kind of hold on to those pollutants and deal with them. Impervious surface, it doesn't have anything. It doesn't have any little grippies to hold on to the pollutants, to hold on to the sediment, to hold on to the phosphorus. It's just waiting there for the next rainstorm to take stuff away. The other thing that we've done as humans is, as we wanted to create houses and roads and cities and downtowns, we've gotten rid of a lot of the vegetation. And that vegetation plays an important role. So you have the sponge on the ground, which is really important, but you also had kind of all these sponges up in the air, which are the trees. And those trees, anybody who's been in a rainstorm, a small rainstorm, if you go under a tree, you stay, pretty much dry. And you can drive around and you can see that underneath the trees, there's usually little dry spots. That means that rainfall is not even getting to this terrible impervious surface that we're trying to manage. It's staying on the leaves, it's staying on the branches, and then it's evaporating back up into the air. So it's a runoff reduction practice. So anytime we cut down a tree, we are losing some of that ability of our landscape to manage impervious. The other thing that we've done is, so we build these impervious surfaces, we get rid of the trees, and then we notice, gosh darn it all, there's a lot of water building up around us. We don't like that. We like to protect our properties. We like to protect our streets. Nobody likes a street that's flooded. I get tons of calls about puddles, which I kind of laugh about because of the scale of the problem that we have to deal with. I don't think puddles are our biggest challenge, but most of my calls that I get are about these terrible, terrible puddles that are affecting people's lives. And so in order to get rid of these puddles, in order to get rid of the flooding that might happen around our homes, we get very efficient and we make sure that any water that comes from our property leaves our property as quickly as possible. Bye-bye, I don't care about it. I don't care where it goes. I just don't want it to bother me. And so we end up with situations like this where, and maybe this person wasn't thinking that way, but probably his builder was or her builder was. So that downspout, instead of going to the lawn where it actually could soak in and not reach the city's storm drain system, not reach the lake, and actually kind of reconnect with where it should have always been going, which is into the ground, it's going right to the driveway and zipping down the driveway and hitting our roads. Now you might think, okay, it's one house, what's the big deal? But if you take the big picture, if everybody's house or 10 houses on every street have this sort of thing going on, the cumulative impact starts to become much larger and larger. And then we end up, where everybody's water goes into the storm drain and ends up coming out of these outfalls. And this is actually an outfall that's in pretty good looking shape, but I could show you some outfalls that are huge, massive gullies because of the amount of water that has shot out of them. And another thing that we think about, so it's not just the flooding issue, the flooding and the excess water can actually become a water quality problem. So particularly in the urban environment, it's not just the pollutants that come off of the landscape, it's the pollutants that get eroded when they hit the streams and the channels and whatnot. And so you often will see things like this, That's, you know, the original channel probably was up here, and so all of that sediment, and sediment usually contains phosphorus, has gone somewhere because of the excess hydrology, the excess volume, the excess flow. So anytime we can interrupt that process and kind of reconnect back to how Mother Nature was doing it, we're winning the game. But we haven't done that, and thus we have a mess that looks like this. It's also a map of my brain, which, yeah, on a good day. We've got tons and tons of issues in Burlington. It's really, I would say we're in a unique position, and I try to think of it as an opportunity and not an insurmountable challenge. For being a very small city, we have a large smattering of all of the different water quality problems and water resource challenges that some large cities have. You know, you look at Philly, you look at New York, DC, we've got most of those challenges, but with a much smaller funding base to deal with it. So who here knows which sewer shed or watershed you guys are in? Where the water that falls on this roof, where do you think it goes? Which stream, which sewer? Does it go to a treatment plant? Okay, well then this will be helpful. So this fairly complicated map are all the different watersheds and sewer sheds in Burlington. And obviously, any drop of water eventually makes it to the lake, whether it goes to the separate storm system to Centennial Brook, which is over here in yellow, and makes its way to the Winooski, which then travels all the way there and gets to the lake, whether it goes to Inglesby Brook, which is the green down here, and a stormwater impaired watershed, we'll talk about that in a second, which goes directly to Burlington Bay, or even this big purple giant amoeba thing, which is the combined sewer system. So that water does go to the treatment plant. However, given the nature of the treatment plant and the size of our storm events, it's not actually getting treated, and there's some things that are challenging about the fact that it goes to the treatment plant. But eventually that water also does make it to Lake Champlain. So first we'll talk about the combined sewer plants, or sewer sheds. So that's that purple here for main plant. Main plant's the large, stinky building that is on the waterfront. If you're on the bike path ever, depending on the day and the way the wind is flowing, you may or may not smell it. We try to keep it down, but it is people's human waste that is being treated there. Over here on the pink is a little bit of combined sewer system that goes to the east plant on Riverside. So that's the one that's near to like Bluebird Barbecue. And then these little other bits of pink go to our other treatment plant, which is at the end of North Ave, North Plant. And so what is a combined sewer system? Combined sewer systems they're fairly common in older cities. So in the old days, when we didn't really think about things as much as we think about them now, we didn't have as many people, there was one pipe in the road, and there still is one pipe in the road. And so that one pipe right now, when it's not raining, is just carrying stuff from toilets and from sinks and from dishwashers and whatnot. When it rains, the catch basins, the storm drains that you see on the roadway also attach into that pipe. And so for small storm events, this actually works out pretty well because those small storm events do get some amount of treatment. They go into the same pipe, so there's the sanitary waste, the poop and the pee that are coming into this pipe, and then there's also the roof drains and the storm drains that are going in that pipe, and it all makes it to the plant. Okay, that's good. However, when we get larger rain events, and it doesn't take that large of a rain event for two things to happen. One of the things, which is the really bad thing that can happen, and we're trying to manage that, is that the water, the storm water and the sanitary waste can't fit through the pipe. And so there are these periodic places, there's 5 in Burlington, where a mixture of dilute wastewater, it's diluted by stormwater, but it's still wastewater, and stormwater actually blow out into the system. So there's one on Pine Street that goes to the Pine Barge Canal, there's one that goes to the Winooski, 2 that flow through the Winooski, the Intervale Wetland, and then there's another one to the north that flows to the Winooski. So we're trying to prevent those, but they do happen, and if they didn't happen, people's basements would flood even more than they do, and the treatment plant would actually be in danger. The other thing that happens, and we're also really focused on this because of the Lake Champlain Tmdl, is that, okay, it manages to get to the plant. The plant processes for treating sanitary waste are very particular, highly engineered. They can't manage it when the entire city is draining towards it. It can't possibly push it through all of the different processes through the biological treatment. So the stormwater that gets to the plant, we treat it as best as we can. We put it through a giant swirl separator to get out as much of the junk as we can, and we disinfect the heck out of it so that there's a low bacteria load, but it can't get the nutrient removal that the other parts of the waste stream get. And so by virtue of our combined sewer system, we do end up discharging more phosphorus than we maybe otherwise would, because we're not able to do that nutrient removal. Does that kind of make sense? As I said, we've already done a lot of work. We're continuing to do work. We believe at this point, because we've done some sewer separation, and sewer separation is when you go ahead and you take that one singular pipe that's up here on South Willard, and you turn it into two. And the problem is that you can't just turn it into two up here. We'd have to run a new pipe all the way down to the lake and establish a new outfall. So when people say, hey, just sewer separation, it's not as easy, not as cheap. Most sewer separation projects that I've seen and that we've done in the city, they put the stormwater in the new pipe, and they're not providing any treatment for that stormwater. The cost itself of providing the new pipe is so expensive to have to also do treatment, often doesn't get factored in. And when you look at other communities that are doing sewer separation, that's often what's happening. So we actually believe, and this is the direction that we're headed, that okay, we don't want to pour money into the subsurface that nobody can see. We actually want to try to manage the stormwater as close to the source as possible, whether that's on our properties, whether that's through bump outs, so like traffic calming bump outs that are rain gardens. If you go to the top of North Street, there's an example there. Those are examples where we just let the stormwater, before it combines with the wastewater, get into the ground the way it's always wanted to. And like I said, a lot of this work will be happening even more so because there is a new CSO rule pending. We've always had to comply with a certain level of CSO protection, and we're actually looking at having to do additional protections. If you're interested in the whole CSO issue, you may have heard about it in the press, we do report any overflows that we have at that website there, so you can go and find out and see how often that's happening. We don't like it when it happens, but it happens. The other issue, and maybe some of you who live up here on the hillside, and hopefully none of the Champlain buildings, the other thing that can happen is that combined sewer stormwater can back up into your basement. So if you have a toilet or a sink or a washer dryer connection in your basement, and the level of that connection is lower than the level of the manhole in the street, when the water gets pressurized in the pipes, it's going to try to find the easiest place to relieve itself. And if your house happens to be at that lower elevation, it will find you and it will come into your basement. By city code, most properties are supposed to have what they call backwater prevention valves, so it's a thing that snaps shut and prevents that from happening. A lot of homes don't have that, and I think a lot of homes never had this problem because we weren't seeing the intense rainstorm events that we've been seeing these last couple years. So that's something that we're also looking at. Anybody have any questions about the combined sewer system before we jump over to separate storm? Yep.
How do you monitor those outflow pipes?
So the combined sewer overflows have real-time monitoring. So when there's a trigger, not me personally, but somebody in our department gets a text message and an email, and then we have to report it to the state. What we don't have right now, and it's very expensive, is real-time flow monitoring. So we only know it happened, it started now, and it ended here. So we might know it's a 6-minute event, we might know it's a 12-minute event, we might know it's a 30-minute event, and so it's made it a little hard to measure our success because we can see that either we're not getting them as much, and for the places where we're still getting overflows, they're not happening for as long. But we don't really know, is it like a little tiny trickle coming out of this big pipe, or a half of the pipe, or a full pipe? So that's something we may be looking at in the future to help better understand exactly how much we have to do.
So then you also don't know what the quality is of the water is. Are you monitoring that for phosphorus?
We're not monitoring for phosphorus. I mean, in general, the state agrees that the contribution of the combined sewer overflows, the actual untreated ones, is not significant compared to the rest of the other phosphorus that's coming out. So it's mostly a bacterial issue that we would be interested in. It's not to say that there's not untreated stormwater and untreated wastewater going out. We're somewhat fortunate in that at least 3, 4 even of our CSOs, it's not like Middlebury where it's discharging like right above where people are accessing the water. Ours are a little bit disconnected from where most humans are, are coming in. And then you had the other question. At the treatment plant, though, we are monitoring the flow that goes out, and we are doing phosphorus monitoring, and that's why we can actually see how much phosphorus on average is going out due to that part of the treatment plant system. So the other challenge that we have are what they call stormwater impaired watersheds. So these are small streams. Inglesby is the small stream that you may see if you're on Shelburne Road. There's a little stream that comes in near the Rite Aid, crosses under, goes by Champlain School, crosses under Pine Street, right next to Flynn. There's Centennial Brook, which is, I don't know if anybody's hiked out there. Anybody been to Centennial Woods near UVM? So that's an impaired stream. And you can tell, like particularly with Centennial, it still looks like a stream. Inglesby is a little harder because it often doesn't have water in it. But basically these streams usually look something like this. They are very, very eroded, very, very incised. The amount of water that has continued to hit them, these poor little streams, like a river can kind of get poked every once in a while. It's used to getting like one big event, one big punch, once a year. These guys are getting it like, it's like the annoying person at, a family party, like, And so as a consequence, they are spitting out lots of sediments and phosphorus from the erosion of these streams. The big thing that the state's focusing on is that aquatic macroinvertebrates and fish can't possibly live in these streams with all of the erosion that's happening, with all of the sedimentation and whatnot. And so the actual water quality target is for us to bring back the fish. The way they propose that we do that is to manage the flow. And there's a big debate with everything that we have going on. When and where should we be doing this versus just focusing on phosphorus, because that's our major issue. So you will probably hear potentially more about that debate as we step forward towards trying to manage our water quality issues. There's certainly some streams that I think could very easily be restored. Even as a water quality nut, I am sometimes challenged by trying to bring back fish and bugs to Inglesby, but I also want to have a community conversation about, if the community really thinks that's important, then we can go there. But if the community is mostly worried about Blanchard Beach, where Inglesby discharges, then maybe water quality only should be the driver. It's really, really challenging, really, really delicate subject, but it has to be said. So how do we deal with the flow? This is an example of a retrofit plan for Centennial Brook. And a retrofit is, so in a perfect world, if we had built our city, we would have been thinking about stormwater all the time and figuring out, okay, we're going to build a parking lot. In order to build a parking lot, we need to have a rain garden next to that parking lot to treat it. Or we need to have a pond or something. But we didn't build things that way. So now, fun, we get to go back through an old city with narrow streets and everybody who wants to park on those streets instead of just letting me do stormwater management. And we have to figure out where to put stormwater treatment after the fact. Very, very costly, very, very hard. And you can see, so over by Centennial, all of these little stars are potential retrofits that we have to do. Some of that is actually going to the ponds that UVM already has and seeing if we can increase the size. It may even be something as cool. We just met with this vendor the other day, these smart tank systems or smart outlets where you keep the same size pond, but basically you have this computerized system that looks and sees if it's going to rain. And if it sees that it's going to rain, it actually drains down the pond in advance of the rain coming to make sure that you can even hold on to more water. So there's some really cool stuff. I mean, I believe that when we're faced with the challenge, there is opportunity and people are kind of trying to start to step up. But the take home for me as a manager is it's going to be costly. This whole thing is probably going to be about $10 million, and Burlington's slice of the pie is about 1.5. We're in the middle of doing this for Inglesby, and the previous estimates estimated that fixing Inglesby, bringing fish and bugs back, is going to be about $10 million. So those are not small costs. We talked before, everything drains to Lake Champlain. So the main thing that's really on everybody's mind, and maybe you've heard the most about, is the Lake Champlain phosphorus Tmdl. So Tmdl is a total maximum daily load. Some scientists have figured out how much phosphorus can Lake Champlain handle without continuing to become more polluted or even, I guess, actually restoring it so that it's not polluted, because we are seeing blooms here and there. And so they've done a whole bunch of fancy calculations. The revised, the final Tmdl, we're still waiting for it. They did release a draft in August, but there's tons and tons of comments on it, and they're trying to figure it out. And some of the things that are being asked of communities is to go back to the wastewater treatment plants. This is the main plant over there, and see if we can go from our concentration, our treatment concentration of 0.8 down to 0.2, which is very expensive. We're estimating that it could cost up to $35–40 million to upgrade our 3 plants. We're right now actually looking to see how much we could just optimize. So by tweaking different processes, how close can we get down to the 0.2, maybe without spending this much money? And there's a larger process that we're thinking about if we could take that money and spend it on stormwater or spend it on combined sewer prevention or stormwater prevention. Maybe we could get to the same outcome of pounds that the state's giving us. But that's a little innovative, because regulators don't usually like to think about integrating concepts. They usually like to keep everybody in their separate bucket. So more on that someday. Regardless of whether we're able to leverage money that we would have spent on the wastewater treatment plants on stormwater, we're still going to have to do reductions of approximately 11% in the separate stormwater range. So if you think about the entire city, between the combined and the separate, we're probably going to have to retrofit at least 10% of the impervious surface. Probably, I'm guessing more like 15–20%, because the only way to make phosphorus like poof disappear is to infiltrate, get it back into the ground, and we can't do that everywhere. I can do that in the Old North End where there's sandy soils. You cannot do that up here where the soils are super tight and you're on a hillside and there's groundwater and all that fun stuff. And I like to remind people, don't forget, it's not just phosphorus. We get like hyper-focused on phosphorus. There's tons of other pollutants that aren't on our radar yet that are still happening just with generalized stormwater runoff. You've got the nutrients, you have the bacteria, you've got sediment, litter, heavy metals. I mean, it's a whole soup of something that I don't want to drink. So, the other thing, and what year are you, most of you guys? Junior, senior, freshman? So you may not have been here for some of the recent fun that we've had, some of the years in which I was teetering on whether or not I needed to find a different profession. Some of the storms that we've had, 2012, certainly 2013, I was underneath my desk for most of the summer because we just had back to back high intensity storms. The system can handle it. If we get 2 inches over an entire day, we can usually do okay. But when we get an inch in a half hour or an inch even in an hour, that's a lot. It's all of that water all at once. And unfortunately, all of the studies, climate change, are showing, we have already seen 71% increase in the frequency of intense events. So it's just going to happen again. So I've been looking deep inside to figure out, am I going to be able to do this for the rest of my life, or am I going to get even more gray hairs than I already have? So, and unfortunately, we're dealing with those infrastructure challenges, those massive flooding events, with a system that's pretty old. When we start to look at our pipes, particularly our corrugated metal pipes in the stormwater system, most pipes have some sort of hole going on, Swiss cheese pipes we call them. And if you think about it, we put metal pipes in the ground, and then what do we do in the wintertime? We spread salt. Does salt and metal like each other? No. So we're kind of actively degrading our pipes in order to keep ourselves safe from slipping and falling. Our outfalls, we've done a couple of outfall projects this year, but we have a number of outfall areas that are in terrible failed condition. I don't have the exact measurement. I know that one of them was 5 megans high or deep of incision. So there's some stuff that's happened out there because we have not had enough money to deal with it. So how are we going to deal with it? So we'll just talk quickly about the Burlington Stormwater Program so you guys don't leave thinking, oh God, what's going to happen? And then we're going to talk about a really cool thing that we're doing with Blue. So in 2009, Burlington realized, holy moly, there's all this stuff that we know about our own system. There's all this regulations that are coming down the pike. We need to have a dedicated funding stream. And so they started a stormwater utility where they actually bill based on impervious surface. So this is a map. All these little red areas are actually mapped impervious surface, and so we charge every property in the city based on impervious surface. And with that, we were able to address some of our permit compliance, to start increasing our regulatory review and start doing some pilot projects. The thing I mentioned before about kind of putting everything in one big basket and really coming up with the most cost-effective, smartest solution is the integrated water resource planning and asset management planning. And then hopefully we're going to get to this implementation at some point. So let's see. Some of the current elements of the stormwater program, and a lot of these are driven by our citywide stormwater permit, we have to do all of these things: public education, public engagement, mapping and illicit discharge detection elimination. We have to review projects for construction elements and for post-construction practices. And then we have to do just general good housekeeping, street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, things like that. But today we're going to be mostly talking about our partnership with Blue. So I think since 2015, we've been more actively, we've always supported Blue, but we've more actively supporting Blue and trying to figure out how we can make this happen in a place like Burlington. Because when we think about our long-term solutions of how we're going to fix our wet weather problems, there's a lot of different ways to tackle it. We can try to get the developers, so like when the mall redevelops, we need to squeeze them as hard as possible to try to get as much of that impervious surface managed. So that's one thing that we're working on. We need to make sure that when we do public streetscape projects that we're trying to manage stormwater at the same time. Even this coming year with the paving program, we've looked at the streets that are going to be paved, and we've tried to figure out if there's one or two that we can pick off and try to manage stormwater better. Let's do it now, because if my paving person paves it, they're not going to let me touch it for 5 or 10 years. They're not going to want me to cut up the street so I can treat it. So we're trying to do that right now. And then we're also trying to figure out how to do retrofits of our public property, whether it's the DPW building, whether it's Edmonds School, or the bump outs that I talked about on top of North Street. But we're also really interested in how do we get people, residential properties as well as commercial, but mostly we're focusing on residential right now. There's all these people who say they want to do something. So what's keeping them from doing it? Is it money? Is it knowing how? Do they just not know what to do? And so that's where we're kind of trying to tackle this stuff. So I'm gonna just say quickly where I think we're going with Blue, and then Chris is gonna tell you more specifically about what Blue is, because it's the foundation of this stuff that I'm talking to you about. So Blue, we're gonna try to enhance Blue participation in Burlington, and we're also gonna use this as an opportunity to evaluate the efficacy of a more formal, long-term residential stormwater management program. And the reason why we're kind of going this direction is there's a ton of other cities that have done it. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We've seen Blue have some great success, but maybe have some barriers because of a couple of different things, and we want to see if we can unlock those current hurdles. And particularly the hurdles seem to be increasing the funding. So Chris has been able to offer, I think, $250 mini grants for properties, and for some reason, they're not necessarily taken off. And I think it could be the amount of money when we look at other places where they're offering $1,000, $2,000, $4,000, up to $4,000 in some instances for people to do practices on their property. And the other thing is actually providing a contractor. So we can have a really well-meaning person who has $250, but if they don't know who to hire, they don't even know where to start, they're probably not gonna get off the ground. And so that's really what we're trying to do here. The other thing is that we're gonna try to do some targeted outreach. David, our Eco AmeriCorps member, has actually been doing downspout disconnection surveys. So he's walked around areas of the city and looked for downspouts that are connected, and I call it connected because they're draining directly onto impervious surface. So he's using what I call stormwater Google glasses. We were talking about it today. It's like once you start seeing this stuff as you're driving around, you can't stop looking at it. But he's doing one thing better, which is he's looking at it and he's actually writing it down so that we can go back to these properties and say, hey, we want to talk to you about stormwater. We want to do a Blue audit and talk to you about how you manage all of your practices, your water quality related practices on your property. And then we want to talk to you about seeing if we could take this downspout and get it onto your lawn instead of onto your driveway. We want to see if maybe you're a good candidate for rain barrel or tree plantings or rain garden installations. We're still figuring out some of the details about exactly how that works and how we manage liability and all that fun stuff that as a scientist you don't really like to have to worry about, but you do. But we're super excited about that opportunity and think it could really be a great model for other Vermont towns. So any other questions? Otherwise we can get Chris up here. Sorry to
No, fine. All right, so I may have met with some of you in Valerie Esposito's class and maybe Kristen Wolf's class, or maybe not, but for those of you I'm seeing for the first time, thanks for having me. I'm Chris, and that's my contact information in case you want to get in touch with me. I also teach here as an adjunct, so I have a Champlain email address as well as a regular email address. Oops. There we go. So Megan's done a great job of talking about stormwater. I'm just going to sort of go through that. Talking about one of the most proven practices is to keep stormwater on site. Anybody familiar with LEED? Are there any LEED certified buildings on campus? Are there? Does anybody know what that means? What does it mean to you when you see that? What's happening in the building? Yeah.
Doesn't that mean that it's eco-friendly?
Yeah. In what way? What do you think is being done that's eco-friendly? Are they taking care of the plants and the fish around the building or the bugs, or what are they doing for the environment?
I think it's more like either an energy or it's a water case.
Yeah, it's mostly energy efficiency, actually. And so I've actually looked at the LEED standards, and I've noticed that in order to get LEED certified, a building needs to maintain certain criteria for energy efficiency, but there's no requirements actually for water quality. So LEED's an environmental certification program, a list of stuff you have to do, and energy efficiency is really important, right? But so is water quality. And so our program, the Blue program, is a program that works on certifying properties. Mainly, we can certify other things, but we certify properties to see if they have or can be better in terms of the effect that they have on water quality. We try to provide incentives, as Megan talked about, and currently we offer $250 if properties can benefit from that. And we're really trying to work with homeowners to come along. It's a very collaborative approach, as opposed to, you can compare and contrast it with like a zoning approach or a regulatory approach that says, if you don't do the right thing, we'll fine you. We take a different approach. We're trying to inspire people to come along, and then we give you credit. If you're doing the right thing, then you'll be Blue certified. Some of the benefits of this approach is that if people do get certified, similar programs have shown to actually increase your home value. If you can sell your house and say, hey, I'm a Blue certified property, that may be attractive to some purchasers. Again, we try to come with funds for property improvements because sometimes we recommend things that cost money, and people are, maybe they're environmentalists and they're willing to do the right thing and spend money on these programs on their own, but maybe they're not. And if we can provide a little bit of money to inspire them to make a change, such as putting in a rain garden to capture runoff, or change downspouts, or change impervious surface, change your driveway, then we can help make these changes actually become implemented. All right. So the Blue protocol has 3 different levels. Like, LEED has platinum and gold, and I don't know if they have silver or whatever. We have 3 levels of certification, and at the basic level, we have a few different things that we're paying attention to. The main thing relates to Megan's presentation is keeping stormwater on site. Because, as we know, stormwater is a bad thing, not only for combined sewer overflows, but for phosphorus. It can also, there are other nutrients that can that can be washed off your lawn. So anybody have a dog or have a kid who doesn't necessarily clean up after their dog in their backyard, you can have like lots of little minefields out there. You know, the dog waste not only contains phosphorus, but it also contains bacteria, E. coli, pathogens. We are taking a holistic approach, and we're trying to get people to think about all these different things. So in order to get Blue certified at a basic level, one of the main goals is to keep stormwater on site. So I'll visit a property, and I will walk around the property, and I'll look at the things that Megan is showing you in her slides about your downspout going down onto your driveway. And I might recommend to someone, hey, could you turn your downspout onto your lawn? And right there, I'm able to capture all the runoff hitting the roof and put that into permeable soil, hopefully permeable, assuming that it's able to absorb the flow, with the goal being if it doesn't go down the street and down into the storm drain, that's less water for the city to worry about and their overflows, or less water they have to treat in the wastewater treatment plant, so it's going to save them some money. Other practices, though, can also facilitate this. So I was watching the Red Sox last summer, and the groundskeeper said, without even thinking about water quality, the desired length of your lawn should be no shorter than 3 inches. That's just for basic lawn health, but there's also a water quality benefit to that. If you can have a longer lawn during regular storm events, it can slow down the flow of that water so that it both precipitates the nutrients into the soil, but it also prevents the water from running off and carrying it down again onto the public streets and into the storm sewer system. We also talk about pesticides and fertilizers. We ask people not to use fertilizers. We ask people to not throw their chemicals down the toilet, which includes pharmaceuticals. We encourage people to bring their pharmaceuticals to take-back days and to pick up after your pets, among other things. So even though we're a certification program, really we're a behavior changing program. We're trying to get people to change their behavior, and we're trying to do it in a cost-effective way that actually is effective, that brings about real change. And it makes sense. So we're changing behavior at the source. Yeah, we could put in all these expensive retrofits, and there's some places we can't avoid that because of what's going on in a particular area, but in many other areas it does make sense to actually work with the people that are affecting the problem one house at a time. Another thing about our program that's different than LEED is that once a building is LEED certified, you can make changes to the building and it won't affect your status. LEED doesn't come back and reevaluate your property. I think that is, it is what it is, but it's not the way that we want Blue to work. So what we've done is we've built in an audit process. So like an accountant, if anybody's taken any accounting courses, we'll try and take a grab a few samples of folks and audit them after the fact to make sure that they're still complying, to keep people honest. And that also will come in handy if we start installing practices like rain gardens or change people's downspouts. We want to make sure that these changes will actually be sustainable and will continue to be implemented, because if they're not, it will have an effect. So we need to be making real change. We have been endorsed by EPA Region 1, among other folks. Here's an example of a project we did, a water bar we did on a very steep driveway in Waterbury. Gravel driveway, very steep. Waterbury is pretty hilly, and I didn't personally do this project, but the soil, even though it's a gravel driveway, this is considered an impervious pavement. The water, when it hits this driveway, is not being soaked into the ground because it's so hard and compacted by the tire tracks that, and you've probably seen this in rural compacted gravel driveways, the water is going to sheet off and it's going to carry a lot of soil and nutrients with it. So we have these water bars that sort of resemble stuff you might see if you're hiking on Lake Champlain, if you're hiking on Lake Champlain. If you're hiking on Mount Mansfield or other mountains, and the water will hit these water bars and it will run off. Some of it will be absorbed directly into the ground, some of it will run off to the side, with the goal being preventing a large flow of water running down the driveway, which mitigates pollution. So, in a nutshell, Blue is just a behavior-changing, incentive-based program. We're going to be working with the city, and we have been, we'll continue to work with the city to inspire landowners and others, even public landowners or possible projects where it makes sense, to follow our best management practices and contribute to a healthy culture of water quality and a healthy Lake Champlain ecosystem. That's blue in a nutshell. Any questions about that? Pretty simple. All right, thanks.